Welcome on the Gospel Spice podcast, where you are invited to taste and see that the Lord is good. Gospel Spice is your Christ-centered podcast infused with in-depth biblical flavors and sprinkled with a dash of French culture, guaranteed to spice up your relationship with God. I'm your host, Stephanie Roussel, and here is today's episode.
Leslie Bosserman, welcome on the Gospel Spice podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
I have been waiting to say these words because you and I have been friends for just about over a year or something. We met at a Christian Writers Conference, and I think we just became instant fast friends. It was one of those things that we went from 0 to 100 really, really fast. And we found out not too long ago that we're going to be book twins. We are releasing our books on the same day. This is such a God wink, and I love that. And our books are very, very different, but I think they complement each other in the sense of pointing our readers to Jesus through the various areas of life. So I can't wait for my people to get to know you, to discover your book and how you're just so much for them. I think that's the thing. What I love about you is that you are so much for the people you serve. You are in their corner, you're cheering them on, and you want to help them be everything that God has created them to be so that they can be the salt of the earth everywhere they go. That's you, Leslie. And that's why
that is so beautiful. Thank you.
That's why I love hanging out with you, because you just point me to Jesus every single time. And your enthusiasm, your passion, your expertise are truly unmatched. And so I want to talk about your book, Emotional Endurance. But before that, I want to talk about you, because really the book is just an excuse to get to spend time with you, Leslie. Let's be honest. When I read your book, I feel like I'm learning from you and you're coaching me, which is what you do in real life. You coach others among many, many hats you're wearing. So do you want to tell us a bit about you, and specifically maybe if there was a turning point in your life that made you realize the importance of emotional endurance?
Yes, of course. So hi, I'm Leslie Bosserman. I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur. So that means I do wear a lot of hats, as you mentioned. So from executive leadership coaching and training and professional speaking, I also started a co-working space with childcare here in Sacramento and am a full-time preschool director. So opposite ends of the spectrum, from child development to executive development, very similar skills, both requiring emotional endurance. So this whole concept of emotional endurance, I've actually been speaking, training, and writing on it for about 15 years. So this golden thread that runs through not just the book, but my life really came from this deep desire to understand why some people, when they face hardship or just tough times they don't expect or plan for, why some just stay stuck and lose hope, and why others look at it, make a choice, build skills, grow in their faith, and then rise up and continue. And I didn't have a name for that for so long. I was just doing research, so all the psychology, all the education, but really grounding it in the Bible, grounding it in faith, and then taking that and creating this kind of meta construct for emotional endurance. So when you mention like an experience or a time in my life, I remember when my husband Joel and I have known each other since we were 8, and we got married 20 years later. And 4 weeks after we were married, we got a call from a nonprofit inviting us to move to the Middle East, which never was on my radar, was definitely not something was in Leslie's type A master plan. And we prayed about it and fasted about it. I was really resistant, to be honest. I was like, nope, we're married. This is great. We're starting our life together. And Joel is such a faith-based man. He's like, I feel like God's calling us here. I feel like there's something here. So a month into marriage, we made the joint decision to become expats and literally transport our life from the West Coast to the Middle East. And we moved 6 months after that point. So it wasn't at the 4-week mark. But building that sense of emotional endurance through that season really started my journey into understanding this concept more.
Okay, so can you define that for us? What do you mean by emotional endurance? Because if it took you 15 years to figure out what we're talking about, can you summarize that for us? And also, I want to double click on that. How was Eman Jordan fast tracking you to learn emotional endurance? Can you help us with that?
Yeah, of course. So I had traveled abroad. I had been to Amman and to Israel, and kind of traveled in the region a few years before. Never ever thinking I would live there, never thinking I would ever be an expat, live abroad, do a whole in-depth service project abroad, kind of in the middle of the Syrian refugee crisis. ISIS formed 2 weeks like before our project ended, so there's just a lot of turmoil in the region, but it was a very safe time overall. So kind of coming together with this cross-cultural understanding as a Caucasian, Western conservative female Christian moving to a Muslim nation, running a leadership project there at a local school. So it just really taught me not only to listen and to go deep, not to just take what I know and put it in another place, but to learn from that environment, but also really garnering this like inner fortitude, this inner strength to keep going when things weren't known, when things didn't make sense. So I define emotional endurance as the dynamic inner capacity to keep going and rise above your circumstances as you deal with life stresses and challenges. So anything you're facing, this dynamic sense of it changes all the time. It's never static. And inner capacity is this set of tools and skills that you develop, just like you're learning in school, right? And so kind of creating that space for that. And then whatever life throws at you, you're equipped for learning that next step. Now, what it's not is a one size band-aid that fits all situations. So it's not like, oh, learn emotional endurance and slap it on everything, because it's such a process of becoming and it's deeply rooted in your faith.
Mm-hmm. And it's both an invitation and a consequence of increasing self-awareness, I would say, because I can so relate to many parts of your story, right? As you know, I lived for almost 10 years in the Middle East, in North Africa. So it's not technically the Middle East, but it's culturally the Middle East. And my husband is from that country.
Morocco's the Middle East. I think it works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is culturally, even though it isn't geographically. And so I completely understand what it's like to, and yeah, same thing. I was working at an international school and doing all sorts of things. And I completely understand being thrown out of your comfort zone and experiencing different cultures and how you have to dig really deep. And yes, the element of faith, the element of community, the element of self-awareness that is required or foisted upon you, may I say sometimes.
100%. And I think to your point of comfort zone, I learned in that space how comfortable I liked to be. And that was not something that had ever like in a self-awareness way, it never crossed my mind. It was just the way I was in the world. So not only was it my first year of marriage to someone I'd known for 2 decades, now 3 decades, but it was a time that was so formative in my early adult development to shape this sense of who am I? What does it take to get uncomfortable? How does that change my response to things that don't go the way I think, to things that go way better than I think, right? And so it just was this really sweet season. It's almost like a container of a 11-month period we were there that tested and tried systems and beliefs that I had held as truths. And we really understood that from like a faith perspective, but also from a deep self-awareness perspective. And I continued to build my coaching practice abroad. We moved from the Middle East to Sacramento, where I am now. We've been here for over a decade, which has been great, and continued to really dig those roots and say, what does it take to not only grow these skills, but then teach them and support others?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I think that's what's really interesting because you're talking, what I'm hearing you say is you're talking about self-awareness and faith. These
Mhm.
are, I was going to say almost internal things, but they are played in the context of circumstances and relationships. So they manifest externally. And then at the same time, circumstances and community, whether that community is marriage or family or the broader community, like all matter of relationships, that reflects back on self-awareness and faith. And so it's just this interplay, not to mention obviously God holding all of that. So I guess, can you help me understand how your increasing self-awareness coupled with your faith and the, I would say, the stretching, is that fair to say, the stretching of your faith in
Yeah,
those circumstances?
stretching,
Yeah.
expansion.
How
Yeah.
does that result in an increased emotional endurance or not, or
Mhm.
the need for it, I guess, the awareness of your need for it?
Such a good question. So when I think about building and enhancing one's emotional endurance, I
Mm-hmm.
look at it as a lifelong process. So
Mm-hmm.
that season of life and just continuing on, each experience, you have a moment to say, how am I choosing to respond to this? Like, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? And God tells us to take every thought captive. Yet we get distracted all the time. Our thoughts get hijacked all the time, right? So when we think about the biblical side of this, the wisdom that we're given, this timeless truth, and yet we are still humans having these lived hard experiences. So when I think about this construct of emotional endurance, the framework that I teach through 6 core principles and then 18 actionable skills, what I do is I break it down into tangible ways to do that. Because emotional endurance on its own, it's a really cool catchphrase, it's a big concept, but it can be taught and broken down step by step. Now, does that mean it's applied in the same way for every single person? Not at all. We're all different people with different backgrounds and perspectives and experiences. And we actually dive deeper into that in the book as well. So,
and by the way, on that, you have 6 principles and 18 skills. And as I was reading through your book, there's some of the skills I was like, yeah, like I kind of got that. And others, it's like, oh, I should really work on that. So not all 8, because 18 sounds overwhelming, but it's not all of them for right now. And it's also a matter of process where you are in life. So it's extremely customizable because that's the whole point. I mean, God takes us where we are to the next step. He doesn't slingshot us 5 steps down the road. So
yes.
it's manageable. It's not, you're not shoving 18 skills down our throat. You're very gently helping us see, okay, like I'm actually good at this, like this skill, so it's actually comforting in some ways. And sometimes it's also, ooh, yeah, my goodness, she's right, I should really work on that. And others, it's like, yeah, further down the road, that's a tomorrow problem.
Well, and just like we don't pick up our Bible and expect to read the entire book cover to cover in a day, a week, sometimes a year, what I tried to do in this book is 208 pages. It's a gift book. So it's designed to be something that is both accessible and beautiful, but really hard packed with research and practice. So when I say research, I am a nerdy nonfiction author by trade and by love. And I brought it to the level where I hope that anyone can pick it up and glean something that they can then put into practice immediately. So, what I love about the organization, and to be fair, I'm a debut author. I had no idea this process of editing, and I'm sure we'll get to this, the book writing process. I have had reorganized it so many times, and I'm so proud of the overall framework and the flow. And you can pick it up, and similar to a devotional, you could pick it up and just pick a chapter out of order. Just like you might pick up your Bible and say, I really want to read Romans today. That's speaking to me. Romans 8, it's right there. So you can choose your own adventure in that sense, which is really fun.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So tell us a bit more about those 6 principles. I'm not going to ask you to rattle off all 18 skill sets. That would not be fair to anyone. But okay, 6 principles, and maybe let's double click on one of them.
Yeah, of course. So they're all alliterations because that's just fun. So the first one, it starts out kind of on this journey of development, just so you know, for a framework. So the first one's fortitude to fail. How do you build this inner resolve that when you face failure, you have skills that allow you to process that?
And thank you. Thank you for that. Wait. Thank you for that, because we're all going to fail at some point. Okay.
Oh, for sure. It's how we learn.
Dare I say, it's a guaranteed promise. It's going to happen. And so there's no shame in that. And I love, because this fortitude to fail section really gives us permission to embrace the failures as opportunities for growth, which sounds so cliche and so simple, but really, come on, especially as type A perfectionist Christians, we need to know this. We need to learn this, because failure is a gift from God to depend on him and to grow. It's a beautiful thing. But how can we build our fortitude for failure? That's what you talk about.
And God designed us to fail so we can recover through redemption, through
Amen.
grace, right? So the whole plan of salvation had this built intentionally.
Yeah. And when I was reading your chapters on that, it reminded me, it sounds so simple, but our skin, when we fall, we can scratch ourselves, right? But our skin has the ability to heal itself. Even when we break a bone, we can, heal from that. If we couldn't heal from that, God would not have designed our bodies with the ability to break a bone. Now, that's an extreme example, and we don't always heal from breaking bones, but does that make sense? If we couldn't heal from it, God would not have forced us in a situation that would necessarily be lethal necessarily. So fortitude to fail, because failure is hardly ever lethal. It's usually an opportunity to grow and learn.
So what you just said reminds me so much of 1 Corinthians 10:13, which says, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with that temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. So when I think about this sense of fortitude to fail, God tells us life is hard. You're going to have challenges. Things are going to happen. I am with you. I am for you. He sent his son. He sent the Holy Spirit. We have all these helpers, all these support systems built in. So
Yeah, yeah.
from fortitude to fail, we go into resilience to rise. So there have been so many beautiful books very recently written on this construct of resilience. And I take the research and the science of resilience and talk about how do we use it so when we face things that are hard, when we feel like we've failed or we've faced things that don't feel like we planned for, how do we rise above them so we can continue on? So, fortitude to fail, resilience to rise, going into hope to heal. So, I very intentionally structured it this way because oftentimes we want to start with hope. We all want to have that purpose and that hope.
Mhm.
Yet, if we don't first begin to understand what's hard, hope just can feel a little trite sometimes, and it's not, it's deep. And when we think about building hope, it feels like, oh, that'd be so nice. How do I do that? So I'm going to dive a little deeper here. It's an area that I feel really profoundly connected to because there have been times in my life where I'm just flat out of hope. And I'm a very positive person. So for me to get to that point, it's really, really hard. And I go a little bit more into my personal story briefly in the book because I want to make it more about the reader's experience and building their skills than it's not a memoir. So I take the science of hope, late Rick Snyder, he's a positive psychologist who studied hope from both a biological perspective and a psychological perspective. And he talks about kind of two different ways to develop hope and then sustain hope. So I'm going to plant a little seed. So if you're curious about this, you can read Principle 3, Hope to Heal, in the book. And then that goes into the fourth principle, which is courage to change. So, one of the things I learned early on as a Christian believer is God accepts you as you are and expects you to change and transform to be more like Him. That is the
Mhm.
whole purpose of this life. And so, having courage and having this inner strength and this bravery, because it takes bravery to step out and admit, I'm not where I know I need to be or where I want to be. How do I get there? What change do I need to make? So we go from courage to change to energy to engage. Because at this point, change is hard. We're worn down. We have some ideas for hope, but we're just tired. I don't know about you, but there are moments where I'm just spent. I run a high octane life with three little kids of my own and two businesses we're running and all the things we're juggling. And so, taking the science of energy management and infusing that with what God says about who we are and our life force through His Spirit to get energy to engage. And then the sixth and final principle is purpose to persevere. So, through everything we've experienced in life, the long suffering, the setbacks, all the things, what is that deep and abiding purpose that allows us to leave a lasting legacy? And that feels very big picture, and it is, and it should be. But I break it down and say, how do we do this to create a daily legacy? What are the skills and the strengths we can activate to do that?
Oh, I love this so much. Yeah, and you
Mm.
haven't read my book. I've read yours, obviously, because I'm talking to you
Yeah, I
about
don't
it.
think that's fair. I'm on your launch team though, so you
Yes,
know.
you are. But I talk a lot about identity, purpose slash calling, and then legacy. And I feel
Mm.
like so much of what you're talking about
Oh,
is the
good.
nitty gritty of some of the bigger theological principles. So I love that. I feel your book is the practical how to of a lot of the things that I talk about. So it's so
Oh, that's
interesting.
so fun. I cannot
Uh,
wait to read it now.
yeah, it's so funny. We're book twins. Book twins, by the way, I mentioned it initially. It means our books are releasing on the very same day, July 28, 2026. So it's really fun. And it's our first traditionally published book. So it's really, really fun. Speaking of book, what was maybe the most challenging part of writing your book?
So I started writing this book 5 years ago on post-it notes and napkins. I had a newborn at the time. So it was more like in the margins of my motherhood. But a lot of people say, oh, finding time to write's the hardest part. That wasn't the hardest part for me. It was really honing in and saying, what is the message that God is calling me to share? I had so many ideas and so many principles. There are many things that I wrote about that didn't make the cut for the final version. So everyone says, oh, is that book two? I said, I'm waiting on God to tell me. I'm waiting to see what that next step is. So in the meantime, I'm doing a lot of coaching and training around topics to play with it. But the hardest part then was just taking all of this and putting it in a digestible narrative that will help bring people through an experience. So it wasn't just, here are all the things I teach about, like a annotated bibliography, right? No one wants to read that. So I'd shared with you when we were at the conference that my original manuscript was 70,000 words. It was very long. The book is 33,000 words. So that's like,
That sounds so
that's,
painful.
and so the hardest part was the editing, the developmental editing, all this. I enjoyed it. I'm a learner. So I love taking each experience and saying, what can I learn from this? That doesn't mean it wasn't painful. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard at times to just say, okay, this concept that I really love doesn't fit here now. So I'm putting it over here in this parking lot. We'll test drive it later for something else. We'll figure that out. And what's been so fun about that is the concepts that stayed in the book are ones I've been able to go deeper in and study deeper. So some of the 33,000 words I didn't even have in the original 70,000. So the whole rewriting, it's been a challenging joy, we'll just say. So
Mhm.
here we are.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes me wonder. Of the six principles you just defined and that you explain in the book, which one did you have most to practice as you were writing the book,
Ooh.
if
Oh,
any?
such a good question. Oh, wow. Whew. Um, so I referenced this earlier in our conversation. I like to be comfortable. I like things that fit well, and I like the temperature to be controlled and the
You know,
perimenopause season of life, right? I
I
like all
I'm
the
so with
comfort.
you on that. My husband jokes that my idea of camping is a three-star hotel.
So I go camping, but my husband calls it glamping. So I
Yeah.
feel I feel
Or even
so
glamping. I don't think I can do that.
I'm
There we go.
laughing so hard I'm choking. Mm.
All
Oh
right.
man.
So you love
So
comfort. How does that play? Like, which principle does that mean you had to practice in the book as you were writing it?
sorry, I like laughed, choked. So give me just a second.
Sorry.
It's a three-star hotel. You're killing me. Oh,
And I know that sounds terrible to say that because lots, I
no,
mean,
it's so
I
honest.
actually stay a
Um,
lot in three-star hotels. Please understand, I do a
you know,
massive amount of
oh,
camping. It's not like we go to really fancy hotels, but
no, I think that's perfect. Okay, so out of all of the principles in my book, I mentioned comfort and like expanding my comfort zone and that I like to be comfortable. There are so many times in this book, writing process, that God was like, you think your comfort zone is this big, but it's really this big. And like, there's a lot of emotional stretch marks between this space and this space, like, whoo, a lot. And so when I think about that, that really lands. And kind of a subsection of that principle is this idea of when you face a setback, how that becomes a setup for something else. So there have been many times throughout the last 5 years of the writing, editing, publishing process where there were things that didn't happen or didn't happen yet. And they felt like failure, but it really was just a pause or a setback. And there were flat out things that we thought would happen that boomeranged right back. And basically practicing what I'm writing as I'm writing it has been an incredible gift. They say that you teach most what you need to learn. And I have proven that point by writing this book.
I can still get that. I literally write in my book that authors write the books they need to read. And that
Yes.
my book is no exception. Like we
Oh,
write those books because we need to read them, because we're learning something. Because if there was already this book out there, we wouldn't be writing it, we'd be reading it. So
well,
something's
and I've
missing.
read so many books recently by authors I love and follow that are on my bookshelf behind me. And I read them. I'm like, thank you so much for writing this book so I don't have to.
Amen,
Thank you.
sister. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And because like I'm reading your book and I'm like, there's no way I could ever write this book, but I'm so glad for the insights because I'm learning. And actually, that takes me to maybe the next thing I want to talk about. When you and I first met I remember being so impressed with your resilience, not to use one of your six principles, but with your resilience to always learn. And you are so teachable. And I remember being so impressed with your ability to see every circumstances as a learning opportunity.
Yes.
And I really admire people like that because I kind of want to be like that when I grow up, sort of thing. Like I want to be more like that. And in your book, you talk about, I think you call it fixed mindset and growth mindsets. And I thought that is Leslie to a T. You
Mm.
have an amazing growth mindset. Can you
Oh, thank
describe
you.
these two mindsets and maybe help those of us listening, watching, who might discover that they have a bit of a fixed mindset and how to change that?
Oh, of course. So, Carol Dweck is a preeminent researcher out of Stanford University and started doing all these studies on how children learn. So, she founded this concept of growth mindset, fixed mindset, and looks at it in depth. And I touch on it in a chapter of my book, one of the skills around failure, because it really creates a construct for how do we approach situations. So, in a nutshell, someone who has a fixed mindset believes that intelligence and circumstances cannot change. So you're either smart or you're not. So if something happens and let's say you take a test and you don't do well, you would attribute that to, oh, well, I'm just not smart, or that test was too hard. You would look at it either internally for blaming yourself or externally blaming the test. And it's not a situation where you take ownership and agency to say, oh, I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, I'm going to be better. It's very much, I'm fixed and stuck. So you've likely heard people who say, oh, that's just the way it is, or you can't change this. It's a very fixed mindset, kind of flippant way of viewing the world. And many people get stuck in this and they don't even realize it. On the flip side, a growth mindset is where you look at situations and experiences as teachers. So you're saying, what can I learn from this? So the same person who takes a test and it's hard and they didn't do well, they might say, I didn't really study all these concepts. Or they might go to office hours and learn from the professor, what can I do better next time? And really take that as an invitation to keep learning. That doesn't mean it's not hard or it's not fun when you get a bad grade. It just doesn't define your identity. So this is the same thing of when you look at like the archaic way of measuring intelligence by IQ only versus like multiple intelligences or emotional intelligence. So all of these things I teach and kind of integrate into my leadership training and coaching to help people understand you are a beautiful, messy, imperfect work in progress. And because of that, you are designed as capable as a whole person in God's image to develop emotional endurance throughout your whole life.
Mm-hmm. So it's so funny. Again, you have not read my book, and not to bring back to it, but I teach, it's the concept I've taught as a Bible teacher for a long time. I call it, we are half-baked masterpieces.
Yes.
We are masterpieces, right? In Ephesians, we are God's masterpiece created for good works. And, we are masterpieces. We are created in God's image, but we're half baked. We're still in the oven. We're still cooking. We're not done yet. So maybe we smell good, and the kitchen smells really good, but all things considered, we're not edible yet. We're just not ready. We're half baked masterpieces. We have
Well,
so
and
much
that
to
also
learn.
is like the crucible of the kiln, right? Where we're in the
Also,
fire and we're holding it together, knowing that God's story is not done.
exactly. And that gives us permission, fortitude to fail, back to, so I love your six principles because they really feed on each other.
It's not like step
Exactly.
one,
Thank
you
you.
have to do this to get to step two. We're not playing Mario Kart here, okay? Sorry, I have an 8-year-old and this is all I think about now. So when we look at these concepts, they're all things that God teaches us through his word and science proves. So I had read so many books in pop psychology and so many peer-reviewed articles over the years because my previous life was working in higher education at UCLA and the University of Illinois. So that kind of nerdy nonfiction author started there and in the entrepreneurial sense, thought, how do we make this more accessible? How do we bring it to the forefront? So when I think about kind of allowing emotional endurance to become a household construct, because we talk about emotional intelligence a lot. We talk about endurance to physically complete something. What if we trained our inner life in the same way?
Mm-hmm. So good. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Final question for you, as time is running away from us. One of the things you help someone who is starting maybe on the beginner stages of figuring out their emotional endurance or trying to grasp the concepts that you're describing and applying them to their lives? You talk about developing margins, and
Mm.
margins are necessary because if we don't have margins, we will not have the capacity to even consider emotional endurance, let alone invest in our own and then invest in others as you do through your coaching. So talk about margins maybe as a, I don't know, would that be a good first step for someone who's trying to figure out what their, how they can build emotional endurance into their lives?
With margin, I like margin a lot. It's something I continually practice as someone who we talk about like how full is your plate? And I'm just like, I have a platter. I'm like, no, I would like a dessert plate with very intentional things I'm working on. So the concept of margin was popularized by Dr. Richard Swenson, who is a Christian physician. And he basically found all these people coming into his private practice complaining about something that they couldn't treat. And it wasn't physical, it was psychological and emotional because they were living overwhelmed, overloaded lives. And he broke it down. And there's a lot more backstory here, but I'll just simplify it. He broke it down and saying, if you look at all your resources, all the things that allow you to be capable of what you do in life, he calls that your power. And then you look at all the things you're working on, your obligations, your tasks, the stresses, the stuff that's typically heavy and hard. That's
Mhm.
called your load. And he said power minus load equals margin. So if you have a season where you're just really feeling worn down and burnt out or stuck, your load might be heavier than the power to manage it. And that means you're in negative margin. And I wrote this book for those people, just so you know. So if you're resonating with this, you're like, yeah, I'm feeling the stress. I'm feeling the overwhelm. I'm feeling the burden of life. And I also used to be this person who had joy and had purpose. And where did she go? Where did he go? So margin is a great skill in this and a great concept. But there are a lot of little things you can start because sometimes I'll pick up a book like this and I'm like, oh, wow, I could never do this. That's so much work. And it is work, but if you break it down into small steps forward every day, even when you don't feel ready to start, that's my superpower. I love taking people who are like, I could never do that. And as a coach and an educator and an eternal optimist, I am someone who wants to help you and help others really find that first step, first half step, and learn to increase the margin. But if you're like, I don't even know how that's possible, you don't have to start there, but we'll get there.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's back to saying, your 6 principles and the 3 skill sets under each.
Mhm.
They're not hierarchical, they're not chronological. You can pick at any one. And so, like you said, you open the book, and if there's a principle that seems to make sense or doesn't, what does she mean fortitude to fail? What does she mean hope to heal? I don't even know how that's possible. Well, go there and then pick one of the skills, whatever talks to you, speaks to you in that moment. And that's a
Or
great
just
place
a
to start.
page, just open a page because each of the skills can be read in like 3 to 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm. Yeah,
something that is digestible. And then at the end of each of the 6 principles, I have a reflect and connect section. So it
yeah,
gives you really tangible ways to put it into practice.
right.
And I have a
Okay.
lot of other fun pre-order bonuses that go into the depth there. So
And I could totally see you writing some kind of, companion reflection book to go deeper, or some kind of study guide to go with it, like a place where we can take a bunch of notes.
on that note, I have, Stephanie. So one of the things that I had so much fun doing, because I'm action oriented. So the
Are
reflect and
you really? Huh? Wouldn't have guessed.
shocking. The reflect and connect section takes you in deeper into the concepts. But I'm like, I want to create something that allows them to go even deeper. So I created an interactive book club guide. Now, you don't have to do it in a book club. You can do it as an individual, but it is one of my pre-order bonuses. And if you join my launch team, which I'm not calling a launch team, I'm calling it a summer book club because we're launching in summer. Who needs one more project? We just want to read by the pool or read by the beach. So I'm going to walk anyone who's on that launch team summer book club through this guide. And then I'm going to hopefully host something post launch. So stay tuned.
That sounds great. Yes. And again, we'll have all the links if anyone's interested, but highly recommend it. All right, Leslie. Well, thank you. Thank you
Oh,
for being so
thank
faithful
you.
for the last 5 years. Thank you for saying yes to God again and again, and for making this a gift book. It's phenomenal. So I am so curious and tickled to imagine what God is going to do through your faithfulness. So thank you so much. And yeah, kudos. I'm really impressed.
This was so much fun. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode. Merci. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and click that bell icon so you are the first to know when we release a new video or episode. Also, would you please consider helping us reach new people with the good news of the spice of the gospel by leaving a 5-star review for the Gospel Spice podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, iTunes, Google, etc. Finally, share and follow us on social media to spread the word of Gospel Spice. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to tune in our podcast with new episodes every Friday. I'll see you in our next video very soon, right here. Merci.